shocking things about William Byrd with how often we hear his name and just associate him with colonial is he is so much earlier than anyone else that we will be talking about, anytime a year 250 subjects. And so I will say I was really hoping that England was going to make it into the World Cup final that is happening today, because that would have been a perfect tie-in for our talk, but alas, they simply got to third place yesterday. But with that, so the first surprising aspect is he is born March 28, 1674. So this is a good 100 years before the Revolution, long before any of the revolutionaries that we think of. But he's born in Henrico County here in Virginia. His father is William Byrd the First, so oftentimes he's, our William Byrd we'll be talking about today is William Byrd the Second. He never used that moniker during his lifetime, but it is technically, he is the second. His father, William Byrd, was the first. Was, again, major landowner, tobacco grower and planter. This is from the Colonial Williamsburg collection. This is a tobacco wrapper. So this is a little logo on a larger wrapper that would go around your tobacco leaves. And so that was a lot of how they were getting their money. And so from there, his father goes on to be a big politician. And William Byrd pretty much takes it on himself to sort of be someone to fill those shoes for most of his life. And so he is educated in England, so he goes over, spends his early years, like what we would call elementary school today, with his mother's side of the family, and goes to a very good school there. And then eventually he would go on to go to the to Middle Temple, which is a law school in London. And so this is a depiction from 1680. So he is there from 1692 to 1695. And so this is what he would have known the school to look like. This is specifically called the Temple Steps or Temple Gate that leads down to the Thames. But that's the school there in the background. His father hoped that his education would lead him to become a gentleman, sort of teach him, what are the proper airs and graces of being an English gentleman. And so that was very much what he was hoping for as well. The problem is, he's born in Virginia, and so he's not accepted by most of English society, but he spends so much time in England and is educated in England that he doesn't quite fit in with the colonists here in Virginia either. And so keep that in mind throughout the rest of this talk, because that really explains a lot about the rest of his life and career, is he is constantly caught in the cusp of these two societies and these two factions. And for his own part, really wanting to be part of that English side, but not quite being able to reach it. And so he becomes a bit of a world traveler because of this. So he returns to Virginia in 1696. It's one of the first times that he was back for an extended period. He is immediately elected to the House of Burgesses. So if you recognize on the left, that's the Capitol building in Colonial Williamsburg, where he served in the House of Burgesses for exactly 2 months, because then he withdraws to return to London because he wants to practice law in London. Again, he cares a lot more about wanting to be an Englishman than a Virginian. And his father was not overly happy with this when it happened. His father, was very much trying to get him up to getting to take over for him someday. But regardless, saw it was important. He had been administered to the bar in 1695 when he graduated from Middle Temple. So he's recognized it as a legitimate next step. So while he was there, he 1696 to 98 is the main years he's practicing law as his full-time job. His only major case comes, he's defending this man here on the right, Sir Edmund Andros, who was the royal governor of Virginia at the time. And he was the defense lawyer for Andros because he was trying to block the establishment of the College of William and Mary. So Andros thought that it was not needed, that people could still go and be educated in England. There was no need for us to establish a college here in the colony of Virginia. I think you can imagine how this case went for him, seeing that we do indeed have the College of William and Mary today. So it was his one major case, and he very much lost. He was against a very well-equipped lawyer who had 26 years of experience, and this is like his first year on the job. And he's the main lawyer. So what actually ends up happening with that is it ousts Andros as royal governor, and Francis Nicholson is brought in as governor and establishes William and Mary. So in 1698, sort of whenever he transitions from doing law full time, he actually becomes the London agent for Virginia. So what that means is that he is the main correspondent between the governor and London. And so anytime there's any kind of lobbying to be done, hey, we need X interest from this company, will you go meet with them and see if they'll send us tea, if they'll trade tobacco with us, whatever the case may be. He's basically the one that's in charge of it. Now, in that same year, Nicholson also tries to dissolve Byrd's father's position within the governor's cabinet. And so Byrd was able to sort of work behind the scenes and convince Nicholson's bosses in London, like, hey, don't let him rearrange the government. But this sort of sets off a rivalry between the two of them. In 1702, in fact, Byrd filed a petition. He got several signatures on a petition to try to get Nicholson removed. And it made it all the way up to the king, and the king was like, no, I like Nicholson. And he just immediately dismissed it. And so this is sort of the general idea behind Byrd's life. So in 1705, he does return to Virginia. Byrd's father had passed away, and so he immediately overnight became one of the most wealthy men in the colony of Virginia. And so he comes back, joins the government, honestly part of the governor's council at that point. We'll come back to that. But he does become the receiver general, which is basically like the treasurer of the colony. And so again, he all of a sudden is this very wealthy aristocrat, and so he becomes the treasurer. Now, it's also around this time, and just 1 year later, 1706, he marries Lucy Park. And so this is not a picture of Lucy, this is a picture of their daughter. I'll come back to her in a second. So Lucy was the daughter of a man named Daniel Park, who Byrd knew through all of his different aristocratic connections. So it is not clear if Lucy was a legitimate or illegitimate child of Daniel Park. He lived with a mistress and forbade any of his daughters from talking to anyone outside of the household, pretty much. But because he had all of these gentlemen coming in to visit him, be it at his main house or at the mistress's house, whichever the case was, they still met some of the daughters. And so it was through this that Byrd was able to meet Lucy. Now, she is 18 when they marry, and he is, check notes, 34, or 32, sorry, I'll give him those 2 years. He is 32, so there is that aspect of it, but because of their predicaments and not actually getting to talk to anyone, Lucy took the match pretty well immediately, just because she didn't think herself and her mother were both worried about the daughters not actually getting to marry. Now, Byrd was not necessarily the greatest of family men. Again, we go back to this constant between Virginia and England, right? He is gone a lot. He is very distant from all members of his family. He writes his writings about his wife sort of allude to her being sometimes subordinate to him, sometimes not. The times when she's not is more often when he's writing in his journals. But she has 2 daughters and 2 sons with her. The only daughter that makes it to adulthood is Evelyn here, but she ends up dying at 30 years old because the legend, at least, is that she dies of a broken heart because she falls in love with the Catholic, and the Protestant Byrds would not allow her to become engaged to him. And so, whether it's some other ailment or something, but the legend, all that survives is, she dies at 30. This portrait's from around 18 to 20, somewhere in there. So about 10 years after this portrait was taken of her, she dies of some ailment, but it was attributed to a broken heart. And so, again, he's very aloof. He's doing whatever he needs to for his career. So when Alexander Spotwood comes into the Commonwealth. He becomes a lieutenant governor, and that's around 1710 or so. One of the first things that he does is he is very concerned about, so if you've listened to Hamilton, you'll know some of the different arguments that Hamilton makes about being really concerned about the debt and the treasury and the importance of the treasury and all of that. Well, basically, Spotswood is doing that for just the colony of Virginia about 80 years earlier. And so one of the first things he does is he gets rid of Byrd's position. Byrd takes that as a personal affront. He's still on the governor's council. He still has a position. So he picked that up around 1712. But he sees it as personal affronts that he got rid of this position that he held. And so in 1750, he sails to England. He says in his letters to people that he's going just to check on some of his business holdings. That would have been the tobacco that was being grown on his father's plantation. But in actuality, he makes a beeline straight for London and Parliament and starts putting into people's minds that maybe Spotswood is not in a position that he should be in, and maybe he should be removed. And this would go on for several more years. So in 1715, he actually gets the general receivership, that position that had been restructured. What little was left of it, he was sick of it, so he gave it to another colleague that was still in Virginia, claiming it was too hard to keep up with it while he was in England. Also, soon after, in 1750, Lucy sails over to join him, but she unfortunately catches smallpox on the ship over and passes not long after. But William Byrd, and the man that he was undeterred, wrote himself in his journals about within 2 months he was courting new women to be a replacement for Lucy. So I want to take a stop here to talk about this, that one of the main things that he's known for is his journals, because he wrote extensively about his days, sometimes very mundanely. Some of them are just simply, I woke up, ate half pound of sausage, drank some milk, and went into work. And then we passed these laws, and then I went home to the tavern, came home and ate whatever for dinner, and went to sleep. Some of them are really boring entries. Some of them have more detail, but you almost wish it didn't. Because it's I woke up, I had my breakfast, I went to the tavern where XYZ lady hang out, and I spent a long time with them. And then I went to work, and then I stopped at a different tavern and hung out with these two ladies on my way home. Remember, his wife is at home while all of this is happening. And then went home to my wife and children. He would also write, he was especially once he inherited his father's estate, was an extensive slave holder. And so he also wrote extensively. He was not shy about writing exactly how he punished any of his enslaved workers. So much so that he writes at one point he writes about a maid who was in the house, so enslaved worker who was working within the household, and how she's so scared of him that she wets herself onto the carpet, and then he beats her because she spoiled the carpet. And so that's the kind of man that he is. So again, we can go back to, it's the problem with the England thing, it's the problem with him being handed this aristocratic lifestyle, and him just taking that and running with it. But he wrote, and I'm not even going off of supposition here, this is what he himself is writing at the time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end when we talk about legacy part. But regardless, back to 1715, he offloads that, and Lucy passes away. He continues on. None of his romances for the next few years are that successful. In 1718, he is once again appointed to be the London agent. And so the reason he becomes the London agent is because Spotswood had kicked him off of the governor's council when he heard about him putting in all these petitions trying to get him removed from office. So they kind of have a major rivalry going on at this point. Around 1720, he does ultimately return to Virginia and makes nice with Spotswood. They meet and they reconcile, and from there they actually, so when Spotswood first came on, they were very well aligned until some of the stuff happened with getting rid of Byrd's position. They kind of come back to center on that. And around 1721, he becomes a, quote, appointed paid agent for the House of Burgesses, and once again returns to England to be, instead of a representative for the Virginia Governor's Council, for specifically the House of Burgesses. So now there's two lobbyists for Virginia colony and Parliament, basically. In that same year, just 1 year after they had reconciled, Spotswood is eventually removed. Byrd never took credit for it, but there were many people at the time who had a feeling that Byrd probably did still have something to do with it. So whether he really forgave and forgot during that meeting in 1720, we'll never know. So that brings us to 1724. He's still working as that agent in London, and so he marries a English aristocrat named Maria Taylor. But Maria Taylor, she again came from an upper class family. She was 25 and he was 50. But she is not in the journals as much, so it seems that she was probably a little bit more, just sort of did what he said, just went with the flow, so he wasn't writing as much about, how disinterested he was. But we're going to come back to that because historians do think there's a reason for some of that. This is a picture of William Byrd III, so that is the only son that he had that survived to true adulthood, that survived all the way to being an elder. So this is him as a child, taken on their plantation, as you can see with the enslaved person in the background who would have been tending to him. Now, 1726, he returns to Virginia along with his family and joins the Governor's Council. That is what brings us into why we are here today. Me coming from the Roanoke Valley, and we're meeting here in the Henry County, Martinsville area. Is in 1728, he is appointed to survey. He leads the Virginia side of the expedition to survey the Virginia and North Carolina line. So anytime you have ever gone down to North Carolina and you passed over the line, you can thank William Byrd. And then two of his associates who were with him were, let me see here, Major William Mayo, so the Mayo River that's in the area. That's named after his associate, and he's going to have one more appearance in our story today. I will also point out on here that the Irvin River that comes through here, Irvin was one of his associates that was with him, was actually renamed to the Smith River. So if you know the Smith River that runs through Fieldale, that's it right here. So that's the dividing line. This is a bit of a later survey. This is from 1733. Byrd himself actually owned this part of the land, and I'll come back to that. But all of these different rivers were named after, or at least the Irvin River, and then the Mayo River, which is not pictured here, were all part of that expedition. And so he is majorly credited in this area, and again, just north of here and just south of here, as being one of the first surveyors who really comes out and is establishing a lot of the boundary lines within the English realm out in this area. So he is the one who's really exploring out here and establishing this area for the first time. So in 1730, he uses his money that a lot of it that he gets for doing all this surveying to build Westover Plantation. So this is still standing in what is today Richmond, but this was his home. It was part of his father's estate originally, but it was a large wood house, and so he took it and used that wood structure as a base to then build the big brick mansion instead. And it was a plantation. It was right on the James River, continued growing tobacco. He actually increased the tobacco production, increased the number of enslaved workers that were working on the plantation, as well as they continue to grow tobacco for profit as well as food for the family to eat as well. And again, he's living here with Maria and William Byrd III. And him and Maria have a couple other children as well, but they do not survive till adulthood. So they have to feed all those people as well, all that family. But he does continue to travel. He is not going back to London as much anymore. He is staying here in the colonies. But instead, he, in 1733, helps establish Petersburg. Now, this is an 1830s depiction, so this is about 100 years after he established it, but it was the earliest picture I could find. Now, it was originally known as Peter's Point, named after Peter Jones, who commanded nearby Fort Henry. So, Fort Henry, if you know your military history. One of those commanders lived nearby, so it was named after him, Peter's Point, and it was right as a strategic point, quote, strategic point on the Appomattox River. So, Byrd is the one who sits down, looks at the land that's there, the geography, says, all right, how can we establish a proper town here so that it can serve people who are either traveling on the river, can use the river for commerce, all that sort of stuff. So even though today it's better known for its preservation of Civil War history, it does go way back to the 1730s instead. The other thing is, as I mentioned, his Westover plantation is in what is today the city of Richmond. In 1733, at the same time that he's establishing the plans for Petersburg, he also establishes the city of Richmond. So, same idea. He looks at the geography. He's the one who first lays out all the different roads and how it can connect with the river. And we know that it was the James River was a big part of the commerce within Richmond. The reason that it is named Richmond, Byrd himself is the one who names it. It is named after an English town near London where Byrd had one of his homes whenever he was living there in London. And what he wrote was that the curve of the James River there in Richmond reminded him of the curve of the Thames in London. And so he wanted to have that name that drew back to London. So if you've ever wondered why it's called Richmond, that's why. So that's 1733. It would take another 40 years before we would see some of the revolutionary talks that we think of it now today with Patrick Henry in 1774, or 75, sorry. But again, you can thank Byrd for it. His one last major surveying expedition comes in 1737. He goes up and surveys what's called the Northern Neck. This is his survey that he sent out. And they started working with that survey. They started establishing maps with it. But when Governor Fairfax comes in, he's not quite satisfied with it. So he sends a new survey out, a new map is made, and it's from that map that the city of Fairfax is made. So, but he is the first one that actually, so the same way that he's one of the first ones to plot Henry County and Roanoke Valley and all that, he's also the first one to plot Fairfax, even though it gets renamed. Because again, if you have learned nothing else today, but how intricate and petty all of the governorship and the politics of colonial Virginia were. And that was certainly true for Byrd. So he did he didn't mind Fairfax. That was who came in after Governor Gooch. So if you know Goochland, that area of Richmond, that's named after that governor. He got along quite well with Royal Governor, or Lieutenant Governor Gooch. But he had actually been the one who had wanted that position. He had heavily campaigned with all of his ties in London about, you please try to get me this lieutenant governorship, so that way he would then be able to move up and become the royal governor. And that was one thing that he never got. He had to fight just to get his father's positions because they were not hereditary. This is not like a kingship. They did still have to be elected. Now, not elected by the people, elected by your rich or aristocratic friends in London. But he was still wheeling and dealing, and he was known very much as a major politician, and someone who's very good with his words and with trying to convince people, and that was his reputation. But we can also see all these ways that how his law profession went, all these different positions that he didn't quite get, all these things. So after 1737, it is when he retires once again to Westover. And he spends the rest of his life mostly writing. He writes accounts of his time surveying down here in this area. In fact, it's believed that one of the reasons why he wrote a major defense for him owning land out here in the frontier and parceling it off. It is believed that he published that so that it would encourage people to come and immigrate to Virginia. and 4 more English people to come out and come to Virginia. And he also writes a number of natural histories. He had a massive book collection. I think it was over 3,000 volumes on history and science and art and all sorts of different subjects that he had in his at Westover. But he really just finished out his life writing and compiling a lot of his different manuscripts, including those journals that would end up ultimately getting published in the 1820s. Excuse me. So he dies in 1744 at Westover. He's buried in the garden there, so if you visit Westover today, then you can actually go and visit his grave. And his main legacy for at first was that he had his son, William Byrd III. Now, you know how today we have the dads who never got to play football, so they make sure that their son is able to play football? Well, he wasn't ever able to break fully into English society, but he did everything he could to make sure that his son could become like an English aristocrat. So, what does that result in? That results in his son fully embracing that English aristocratic lifestyle, such as not really working or doing much, but lounging around with your friends and gambling. And so ultimately, in the end, William Byrd III gambles away all of his father's and grandfather's fortunes. So he is in the States. He dies in 1777, so right in the midst of the Revolution. He was on and again, I'm sure his father rolled over in his grave the day that his father joined the Revolution, but he did what he could to help out the Continental Congress, things like that. He tried to pledge money when he could, but again, he was kind of broke. But he did what he could, contributing to the revolutionary cause until he does pass away in 77. After that, Byrd's books that are, you can tell who I talk more about more often, but William Byrd's books, those were published during his lifetime, remain in circulation. It's around the 1820s, 1830s that some of his unpublished things are published for the first time, such as those journals that I was talking about earlier, such as he had another book that was sort of tied with the defense of expanding westward and his holdings here on the Virginia-Carolina border. He had another one that is believed to have been an early form of he was going to do like the whole Virginia history and then just never finished it. But parts of that were published at the time. So he became a major literary, part of his literary legacy, and was published in American literature textbooks all throughout the late 1800s, early 1900s. But today, primarily he's remembered, we have the school named after him up in Roanoke area, we have the different rivers in the area that him and his party named. He's primarily remembered for this surveying work, which I will once again just reiterate how much he did not want to be here in the U.S. He wanted to be in England all the time. And so it is ironic to look back at how much he tried to make sure his son established that good English aristocratic lineage. And instead, his son joined the Revolution, and Byrd is mainly remembered today for his contributions to settling our areas out here in southern Virginia and northern North Carolina. But that is the long short of William Byrd II. So thank y'all so much for coming out today, and happy to answer any questions you have. Yes.
How far west did he go establishing state line?
That's actually a really good question. He didn't go too far past this area. Basically what it was a huge effort from both the colony of Virginia and the colony of North Carolina. And so you had the Virginia side had their own team, so that was Mayo, Irvin, and Byrd. Oh, and I forgot to mention, William Mayo, the way he comes back up, is he is the one who co-establishes Richmond with William Byrd. So I forgot to mention that. So you have their team, and then you have the team from North Carolina. North Carolina is the one that's going out more towards Tennessee. They do this section that's in this area, and they do another section that's over on the coast. So they go down from Williamsburg, start there, travel overland, sort of passing some of the southern mountains, and then come do this region. So I think they had, I know they're not doing as far as Abingdon. I know that's the North Carolina team, at least from what I last read. But I don't know exactly what the westernmost boundary was. So.
Well, was he really a surveyor, or he just oversees it?
He was surveying alongside them, yes.
He knew how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they had actual surveying equipment back then.
Mm-hmm.
And what would they put stakes and stuff along to?
They would have had a chain that has a specific name that I'm forgetting. Gunter? A Gunter chain, this is why I keep hunting around. You would have a Gunter chain, and it's a very specific measurement, but basically that's how they knew. It was standard across surveying for English surveying. And so then you would do it basically the same way they do it today with the spool of string, and you stretch it out and measure how long it is. It's basically the same thing, they're just using a string instead. And the same thing when you get to Washington and Andrew Lewis and all these people who are doing surveying during what we think of as colonial time leading into the Revolution, they're doing the exact same methods that Byrd and Urban and the others are doing back then.
Did they use metrics or did they use regular feet, yards, and inches?
They are using, well, again, it's kind of its own thing. They're just using this Gunter chain, and so it is so many links of the chain. And then from there, I do think it's getting converted into miles and feet and all that like we think of today. Any other questions?
Is Harry Byrd a descendant of this same Byrd, or is it a different branch of the family?
There should still be descendants of Byrd III. So that would be directly to Byrd II that we've been talking about. But that was the only one who lived long enough to have any heirs. I've never looked to see if it, survived past the 1800s or not, but I'm sure it did. I don't know of any that are in this area or anything like that, though.
The Byrds in Winchester are not the same.
Do what?
The Winchester Byrds
Mm-hmm.
are not the same thing.
I don't think so, no. No, this was, so in England, Byrd, B-I-R-D, was a very common last name. When a lot of them immigrated to the US, a lot of them adopted B-Y-R-D. That just became the common American spelling of it. And you would still find both within the colonies, but it was a very common last name, so yeah, it was several different families. Now, not to say, if you go back to Battle of Hastings, is there some similarity somewhere, but as far as this generation, no, they do not consider themselves related. All right. Well, I'll also hang out for a minute if anyone thinks of anything else, but thank y'all again for having me.